Hello, my name's Chris Wood. Welcome back to session 2 of term 2 of the Amiga Art School. Today's session is on tone and scale, so we're going to be revisiting some of the stuff that you did with me in term 1, except we're going to be putting a bit of a spin on it. I've got a number of different projects lined up for you on the scheme of work, but please don't feel pressured into doing all of them. Just do what you can and have a bit of fun. Cheers.
The subject for today's still life is a tiny vase and a wallflower that was perched on our washing machine in the kitchen. I took this photograph probably a couple of weeks ago. When I first happened upon the little vase and it was casting a lovely shadow, I thought, okay, that will make a great still life. So I rushed and got the iPad and added a couple of spoons to the composition, and I think the whole thing sort of works reasonably well. I wasn't entirely happy about this diagonal shadow here, and this lot also sort of confuses things a little bit. However, that said, I will be adding this into my composition, and what we've got on the sketchbook, I've got 2 pages of a square sketchbook. It's 190mm square. The focus of the composition is obviously on the right hand page. Some of it is going to be on the left hand page, and basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working in tone, and we're going to be thinking about scale. Now obviously we've got a tiny little object here. It was quite isolated on the top of the washing machine. As I said, I've added in a couple of extra things, but in terms of what I'd like you to do, I'd like you to think about the relationship of the objects, look at the negative spaces in between the spoons, look at the relationship of the shadow to the jug, and what I found, which was, I mean, it's fairly obvious if you look at it, but the shadow is obviously much larger than the jug. The jug is quite foreshortened because I'm looking down on the jug, but here we're seeing this quite long shadow, and when you start looking at some of the shadows, they're quite distorted as well, so be careful about that. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be working in watered down Indian ink. Now if you haven't got any Indian ink, don't worry, that's not a problem. I'm sure you've probably got a box of watercolours kicking around somewhere. So if you mix Prussian blue and Van Dyke brown, or if you haven't got those two, then an ultramarine blue also mixed with a very dark brown will give you something that's fairly close to a black, and that's really what we're doing. We're doing a monochrome study of this, so it's just going to be in delicate shades of grey, and as I said, we're going to be thinking about all these negative shapes, which will be quite interesting when you sort of start to break the thing down. What I don't want you to do is to get too fussy and too worried about some of the sort of tonal relationships. We're going to cut this down, and we're going to be using maybe about, I don't know, 6 shades of grey. So it simplifies things, and you know, I think one could do a study just of one spoon, and it could take you 3 or 4 hours to do that. But obviously we're going to try and keep it simple. And as I say, watered down Indian ink if you've got it. I'm going to be using, as I say, probably half a dozen different shades of grey. This is my trusty palette, and what I invariably do is put a dollop of full strength ink in one of the reservoirs, and then I transfer some of the ink from there to there, and I'll put in some water, then I'll put a more watered down version in there, and even sort of wetter version in there. So we've got sort of 4 to kick off with. This shot gives you a little bit of an indication as to the painting process. What I will be doing is going over the spoons and the solid objects with a dipping pen. So this is my Mark 1 dipping pen. And what I'll be doing is leaving the shadows or leaving the edges of the shadows because what I want to try and achieve is a soft edge, because if you look at a shadow, there's no real hard edge to it. So what I quite like in painting generally is a combination of hard and soft focus, or hard and soft edges. So that's what I'm going to attempt to achieve with this. So this was my final response to the first project, which is just looking at tone and looking at scale and thinking about the overall composition and where the main focus of the composition is. So for me, where the main focus is, it's the vase and the flowers. I've sort of exaggerated that focus maybe by actually doing some watercolour on the wallflowers there. So your eye goes straight to those wallflowers, and then it goes to the vase, and then you start getting interested in some of the other stuff, or at least I hope you do. Now, what I've done is, just as a kind of a compositional little trick, I've added in a grayscale here, and that basically anchors this diagonal shadow. So the eye should, in a good composition, go round in a circle. So, you know, you should really, I should have had a diagonal to take your eye over to the grayscale, but yeah, I think your eye does generally go around in a bit of a circle, because this diagonal here takes you down to the bottom of the page, then you go to that, and then you go to the dark bit of the grayscale, so, and then up and round. So that's that one. I could have left it entirely in black and white or monochrome, but I think just that little touch of colour there sort of adds a certain element of quirkiness to the composition. So here we have another finished, or almost finished, response to the first project. So this is just a collection of small objects and the relationship of the object to the overall format. As you can notice at the bottom, I've added in a grayscale. You really don't have to do that, but I think it just adds an extra something to the composition. In terms of the choice of objects, as you can see, I've got a man-made object in the form of a used tea bag. I've got a cauliflower stalk, and we've got a flint with holes in it. Basically, you can choose really any object you like, but it's really about the relationship of those objects and perhaps the shadows that they're casting as well. So I've deliberately kept the sort of range of greys fairly close, because I didn't really want anything too dark to stand out, so I wanted it all fairly delicate shades of grey. So this is another response to task 1. And it's just a kind of collection of very random objects kicking around the house. So there's a cobbler's last, there's the handle of a wooden jack plane. This little character is a plaster cast of a robot. Limpet shell, and I don't know what this little character was, but he seemed rather appealing at the time. The spaceship in there, that's just a figment of my sort of warped imagination. How it's done with a variety of different things. There's a dipping pen used for some of the outlines. Other bits of the outlines are done with a fine liner, and the overall tone is done with watered down Indian ink. The second task on the handout was to subvert a piece of still life, and basically I haven't done that task, but a pop artist called Claus Oldenburg has done it particularly well here, and I really didn't want to compete with him. So this is an illustration from a book of mine on Oldenburg, and he produced hundreds and hundreds of quite bizarre proposals for giant-sized pieces of sculpture based on quite everyday objects. Now, it could be something as simple as a lipstick to a clothes peg, but here what we've got is a giant shrimp, and this was proposed in 1965 to be made and dumped off Ellis Island, which is in the Bay of New York.